What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2023 schedule preview and projected record series. The Kentucky Wildcats are up next. Before we get to 2023, let's look back at 2022. Here was the schedule from 2022, a 7-6 season for Kentucky, 7-5 in the regular season, and believe it or not, 7-5, that was a little bit of a disappointment from where Kentucky had been the last couple of years. They've really turned this program around, but you look back at that schedule, they had Louisville in the non-conference. That was the only, competitive game there, or the only quality team they played in the non-conference. You look at who they played out of the SEC West. They played Mississippi State every year. They also played Ole Miss last year. That Ole Miss game was a game that they had a good shot to win. Could have beaten South Carolina, Vanderbilt as well, and they played Georgia tougher than maybe anyone last year. So it could have easily been a much better year, but again, that schedule really was not too tough last year. So 7-5, definitely a disappointment. Looking ahead to 2023, here are the games outside of the division. They'll play Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, and Louisville, this time on the road. So again, a very weak non-conference schedule. Louisville could be pretty good though, so that may be I know Kentucky's owned that rivalry as of late, but that possibly could be a better game this year, with a game that maybe either team will have a chance to win. They'll play Mississippi State. They always play them, of course. They'll play them on the road this year, and then they get Alabama, so a very tough draw out of the West. Maybe not the best team out of the West this year. Of course, LSU won that division last year, but still, Alabama is Alabama, and you don't want to have to play them. So I guess good news is the game is at home, but that's not a whole lot of good news there because, again, Alabama, very tough opponent. So you look at this, if we go week by week, they'll start off with Ball State, then they play Eastern Kentucky, and then it's Akron. So 3 easy wins there out of the gate should be. 3 non-conference games, again, that should not challenge this team at all. Then they play Vandy on September 23rd on the road in what will be actually a revenge game for Kentucky. That one will be interesting there early in the season. I guess they do play early in the year this year, September. The SEC has definitely changed some things around this season. You look at where they play Georgia. They used to always play them kind of late in the year. So they've definitely moved some games around this year. It's a little bit different. But, they'll play Vandy on September 23rd on the road, and then Florida on September 30th. So you got 2 conference games there after the 3 non-conference games to close out the month of September. Winnable games, Vandy and Florida, I think, winnable games. So Kentucky has a chance to start off 5-0 before going into the month of October. They'll play Georgia on the road. Obviously going to be a very tough game. I mean, it's just going to be a tough one there in Athens. Hard to say that, I don't really know if I'd give Kentucky much of a chance in that one. And then after that, they'll play Missouri at home, another winnable game. They get a bye week after that, so a pretty good spot for a bye week. They get it before playing Tennessee. They get Tennessee at home. Tennessee, maybe not quite as good as they were last year. We'll have to wait and see, obviously, but maybe a winnable game there for Kentucky, and that could be a good one. And so you could be sitting there with a pretty good record going into the month of November. Maybe just 1 loss to Georgia, or maybe just 2 losses. Still a chance to finish strong here in the month of November. They'll play Mississippi State on November the 4th on the road. That'll be a tough one, tough place to play. Then it's Alabama after that. And, they don't get that easy non-conference game in the next to the last week. They'll play South Carolina on November 18th on the road. So Alabama, then on the road at South Carolina, and then closing things out on the road at Louisville. A pretty tough schedule. Their only back-to-back road games are South Carolina and Louisville, so no back-to-back road games in the SEC. But, I mean, you just look at the schedule, and, there are a lot of potential wins here, but there are a lot of potential losses as well. I mean, just look, they lost to Vanderbilt last year. So you go after those first 3 games, Vanderbilt, Florida, Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Alabama, South Carolina, Louisville. Are you telling me that Kentucky has any guaranteed wins in that stretch? I don't think so. Those are all going to be tough games. A lot of winnable games, but like I said, a lot of losable games. So it could come down to a lot of close games, and if Kentucky can find a way to win those games, that will really determine how their season goes. So there's potential to have a really good year, but also potential to have a pretty bad year, or maybe they wind up in the middle. Overall, a pretty tough schedule for Kentucky here in 2023. here were the projections from last year for Kentucky. You can see they were 7-5. The projection was 8-4. I picked them to go 8-4. The FPI had them at 8.2 and 3.9, so basically 8-4. And the over/under was at 8.5. So they really were below expectations last season. 8-4 was the expectation, and according to Vegas, they were more likely to go 9-3 than they were 7-5. So a disappointing season for Kentucky last year. Looking ahead to this year, what will the projection be? We'll find out here in just a second. I look at this team with Devin Leary coming over at quarterback. They've got their guys back at receiver. This could be an interesting team. I've started my very early evaluations of these teams and really breaking down who's coming back, who's coming in through the transfer portal, all of that. This could be a sneaky team next year after having a disappointing year in 2022. Again, they were 7-6. This is the schedule. This is the scale that we use. If it stays in the white 50-50 game, that's a game where I think the spread will be less than a touchdown. Less than 20 over 80, those are games where I think the spread will be 20 or more. In the in the orange and the blue, those are games where I think the spread will be double digits, 10-19 in that range, 30-39, 61-70. Those are games where I think the spread will be about a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points in that range. So we'll start with the easy wins for Kentucky. And they've got a really favorable schedule at the start with Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, and Akron. So all three of their first games should be easy wins. It would be a shock if Kentucky is not 3-0 coming out of those first three games. So easy wins there to start. It does get tougher, obviously, when you get into the grind of the SEC. So they'll play 8 straight SEC games before playing Louisville at the end. And again, you like the SEC schedule and the fact that you don't have any back-to-back road games, but they do have Alabama out of the West, so that makes it pretty tough. We'll go to those next games, and these are games where, again, I think they'll be favored by about a touchdown. Vanderbilt on the road. Look, I know Vandy won last year, but Kentucky still, they were overall the better team last year. But I'm not going to put this one in the blue because Vandy did show some signs at the end of last season. They did win a couple of big games, and because of that, I think Kentucky's only going to be favored by about a touchdown. Missouri is one because of home field advantage. We're going to swing this one to Kentucky by about a touchdown. If it was at Missouri, I'd probably have that game in the 50-50 category. You've got Louisville there at the end of the season on the road, rivalry game. I know Kentucky's pretty much dominated this series as of late, and we don't know a ton about Louisville with a new head coach, new quarterback, but I think Kentucky will be favored by 7 or 8. I feel pretty confident in that. And then that leaves you with, so 6 of their games, they'll be favored. They'll be a clear favorite in 6 of their 12 games. Not necessarily a huge favorite, but a clear favorite in 6 of their 12 games. Now we have to look at the games where they'll be underdogs. I think Georgia and Alabama, those are both games where they will be double-digit underdogs. Probably 17, 18 points against Georgia, a couple of touchdowns against Alabama. That game is at home, so maybe it's not a huge number. But they're going to be double-digit underdogs in both of these games. And as far as the projection goes, these games will be counted as losses. And that leaves Florida, Tennessee, Mississippi State, South Carolina. I think Tennessee and South Carolina, those are in the yellow. So those are games where I think Kentucky will be underdogs by about a touchdown. Tennessee is at home. That's why I'm putting this one in the yellow. If it was on the road, it might be in the orange. But play it at home. Kentucky probably only an 8 or 9 point underdog. South Carolina on the road, probably about a touchdown underdog in that game. It seems like those games are close more times than not. And so I don't expect a big number there. South Carolina, they're probably going to be a preseason top 25 team. Kentucky probably is not, but I think they'll be very close. I think they'll be one of those teams that's just outside of the top 25, at least in the preseason. Of course, once we get into the season, these numbers, obviously, they're going to change. But this is just a very early projection, not a prediction. I don't do predictions until after spring, but a very early projection here based on the schedule. And Florida and Mississippi State, those are both your 50-50 games. I think those are games that could go either way. Don't see a big spread in either one of those, probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 points. So that's how we break it down here for Kentucky. What does that come out to? Again, we count Georgia and Alabama as losses, I should say. Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, and Akron as wins. And then we average everything else out, 65% for the purple, 35% for the yellow, 50% for the games in the white. And we get a projection of 7-5. So the same record as last year. Now, I think this Kentucky team, like I said, could be sneaky good. They could do better than this projection, but it's going to be tough when you've got Georgia and Alabama. If you're already counting those games as losses, and if you say, they're probably going to lose Tennessee, South Carolina, at least one of those, you're already at 3 losses. And then you've got Florida and Mississippi State, games that could go either way. Vandy, Missouri, Louisville, yes, they'll be favored, but not huge favorites in those games. So you can see how 5 losses can happen, just like it did last year. But again, that is the projection for Kentucky in 2023 to go 7-5 once again.